was inevitable that we would have to face what we're facing right now, but there are a lot of challenges connected to the awakening process, obviously. And so the term negative alien agenda, for some people, doesn't exist. They don't think there's any negative aliens. But if we look at the world, you know, obviously there's a lot of darkness. Obviously something's going on. So maybe the terminology doesn't work for some people, but there's obviously something parasitic. There are dark technologies. There's obviously, you know, some sort of like thing happening that is not totally positive, but this is part of the experience of duality. But there are things that have caused it to be like really, you know, heavier than I think a lot of us were prepared for. So through this negative alien invasion, which I talked about a lot yesterday, the interaction between polarized forces of male and female principle were intentionally split apart into gender reversals. The primary method of accomplishing this agenda was to attack and destroy the mother and Sophianic female principle in order to stop her from embodying in matter. And so I'm going to explain what that's all about. So going back to what I was talking about yesterday with the planet Tiamat that was in the 5D Earth, basically the planet Tiamat is related to the destruction of the Sophianic body and the inability of the Christ Sophia consciousness to incarnate in human forms on 3D Earth in hierogamic union, right? So, but that's a 3D Earth, right? But this is not a 3D Earth. So there's a lot of dormant dimensions that we are connected to here upon this earth, but it's not a 3D expression. The 3D expression is way more of a programming. It's connected to our lower chakras. It's connected to survival, emotional reactions, sexual energy, and also our solar plexus and our ego nature. And nothing wrong with that part of ourselves, but if it's cut off from the rest of ourselves, then the rest of ourselves is operating from somebody else's instructions, which is actually feeding those lower chakras things that it acts upon. So these trigger events create survival. These trigger events create reactionary responses like anger and hatred. And also, you know, the ego conflicts of I'm right, you're wrong. And that's clearly like cut off from the rest of ourselves. So the rest of ourselves needs to come in and integrate with those lower chakras. And when we do that, you know, that circulation of energy is beginning to clear out, you know, the dead, stuck energy. And it's able to clear out the distortions that come from implants. And it's able to start to perceive this whole concept of hierogamic union, which I'll get into in further slides. So the explosion of Tiamat, which was struck by Nibiru, created the asteroid belt. It broke that initial balance of the Tiamat and Apsu in this free will universe. You know, this misuse of power was behind that, and the imbalance of the masculine and feminine, which has stepped down into tyrannical rulership and the patriarchal program that's impacted both genders. So it's really important to understand the wounds of the masculine as much as the wounds of the feminine, but we are all dealing with these wounds that have been masked by these programmed versions of ourselves. And the amnesia is sort of like total unconsciousness to the traumas of the past, because we're not learning in school, oh yeah, there have been exploded planets. Oh, you know, this took place in our history. So we're not able to process any of this stuff growing up. And then when we run into this information, yes, it can create an activation, it can create an awakening, but it can also create a lot of doubt, because people are like, well, how could it not be taught to us? Well, it's very, very troubling to wake up to the reality that these mind control programs are embedded in our culture, in our religions, in our political world, in the entertainment industry. And it's very obvious that it's in our commercials. It's definitely on television. I mean, and the news is the worst part of it, the mainstream news. So the female consciousness of the planet Tiamat was Sophianic. So when she exploded, her consciousness descended into a collective form body, which is known as the Achamoth. So through, you know, studying like Keelan, it's like I wrote a lot about this. I wrote a book about this kind of thing before I came across this information. And that book was still in the works, but a lot of it got lost, and that's a long story. It's a long story. And that was a huge, huge bummer, because my journey since I was a child were very, very much about these concepts and a very, very deep understanding of like all of this stuff. And anyway, I was like all about this kind of information and just really feeling into it, but I couldn't really put it into the words that I'm able to now. When I was writing the book, it was very much from my own experience, but and in a way, like I can relate to it a bit more than you know, anything, because it just was a part of my own healing process. But, you know, we all hold pieces of this, right? So Achamoth is something that Gnosticism has talked about. Achamoth is something that has been mentioned in many texts, and Achamoth is a part of the Sophia energy. And basically it's like the trauma aspect of this exploded planet. Like when she exploded, the trauma of it, because it was an extension of the Sophianic body, caused this part of herself to become trapped. So Achamoth is a name for the wounded goddess, fragmented body parts, which were collected and trapped by the negative alien agenda and fallen angelics in the 2D underworld of the planetary body. So the way I was relating to it in my own life was all like this massive underworld journey that I went on. And I'll be publishing some, you know, stuff about it. That's not so much about me, it's about a lot of this, but it's a bit of both. I was in the underworld, or what I call the underworld, for such a long time. It was crazy. And I understood what I needed to do on a larger level. So much of it got downloaded to me as a kid of like, okay, you know, you got to prepare to go into this. And I was being prepared. And then it's like the hand of the crone, like kind of dragged me in. And it was a little different than like, you know, feeling dragged in by like Hades, but I, you know, started to remember, you know, those archetypal stories and those myths and those times where I really feel like, you know, I've lived that. On a soul level, we've all lived these myths. We are living myths. Our soul energy holds these mythologies. But I was like, all I could think about was this stuff. It was like I was living a double life. But it had to do with, you know, going into the underworld to pull these pieces out of exile, out of like, you know, so-called hell. And I started to recognize, you know, this underworld is actually the mother womb. It's like a part of the goddess energy is actually trapped in the mother womb. And so the tattoo of the labyrinth was what I got when I got out of it. But it was like really intense. It was really intense. And there was like, I was also dealing with targeting, but every day I felt like I was being suffocated. I mean, it was energetically something I cannot possibly describe. And when I ended up at this clairvoyant institute, they said, you actually died. You left your body for, and they told me like 10 something years, and you basically fully left, and your Kundalini kept your body alive. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that they see all this. And they go, you've been clearing inorganic entities from wormholes. And like, and they were able to actually like see all this. I was like, oh, that's nuts. And it wasn't anything I was ever going to really talk about. But, you know, a lot of us are doing this sort of thing. When we go into the underworlds, we're pulling pieces out that are being harnessed and used. And that's what the whole like shift is all about, is getting those aspects of ourselves out of hiding, out of exile, out of being bound to the underworld, which is the womb energy, you know? So when we're stuck and we're not able to manifest things in our life, it's because there's some sort of gatekeeper or somebody or something that's standing in the way. So as much as I felt the crone encouraging me, I did feel those dark energies, and they are gatekeepers, and I was running into them in my life. One of them was connected to the Mars recruitment. So part of me having, you know, getting out of the underworld or transforming or rising to the surface or being able to get my life back meant that I had to deal with these gatekeepers. One of them, well, a whole group of them were wanting to steer me off planet and take me off planet with a target date of being 2012. And it started in 2006. I talked about this yesterday. I'm not going to get too much into it. But when I just couldn't stand it anymore, and just like not being able to emerge and feeling stuck and feeling all this weaponry on me, and I just gave up, that's when I was face to face with the Mars recruitment. But there was also other characters I had to deal with. But I realized, you know, these are the gatekeepers that I'm meeting in human form in order to get my power back. And so this happens in our lives. We meet certain people for a certain reason. Sometimes it's to end agreements with, sometimes it's to be able to see through and see, wow, okay, that's a plant, that's a sabotaging influence, or wow, this person's being used to take me or capture me or take me somewhere I don't want to go. I mean, this is part of like how we heal though. And this is what we're required to do on the planet, is face these difficulties and face these gatekeepers, and then be the spiritual athlete that's able to cross over that barrier, leap over that hurdle, knock down that wall and say, you can't have me. I do not consent. So when I was being encouraged to go off planet and go to Mars, I had to stand up to all of them. And they were all like a group of men connected to alien technologies. It was a branch called the Aviary, connected to MJ12, connected to these timelines of colonizing Mars. And it originated, or the information exchange happened in Eisenhower's administration. And then Eisenhower was briefed that he would have a descendant that would do what he couldn't do, and just all this weird stuff. And I'm like, okay, trying to take it all with a grain of salt, and all these different things coming at me constantly from outside. But like, to me, it was a part of the inner work. And part of the inner work I was doing was to break free of, you know, this dilemma that we've been in, of having this false programming running the show and giving us false gender identities. So the patriarchal programming has been something that, you know, people have run into. Doesn't mean that they emulate it completely and totally, but it's a programming that's in our society, and it's passed down generation to generation. And it basically has kept a portion of that divine feminine, you know, in the underworlds. And I'll get into that more. And it's captured the male energy and twisted their ego around to be a controller, or to be, you know, sort of an authority. And not everybody's like this, but they've been pushed upon us. And we see the way that is with the government structure, with the way that religion is, with a male-dominated, I mean, it's a male-dominated system. So I'm all about balance. I'm not into the feminine taking over, but the need for that balance, the need to resurrect these aspects of the feminine, to reunite with the higher aspects of the masculine, to then break the programming of the false king of tyranny, the patriarchal controller, and the victimized and exiled feminine power and wisdom. So this is all a process of this greater alchemy that we're all part of in this healing process, to restore the sacred union and to restore this broken and fragmented creation that has exploded planets. These exploded planets represented the masculine and feminine in harmony. And the Atlantis and Lemurian energies that began to become more and more imbalanced and leaning towards, you know, these particular programs were just stepped down into this particular physical density. So this is what our inner work is all about, is recovering from that, recognizing these programs. The Saturn Moon Matrix is a huge part of those programs. And what they've done to us is, you know, given us like a false sense of self. And that's why when we go into the underworld journeys or the dark night of the soul, and we recognize that darkness isn't out to get us, it's not evil, it's us, you know, transmuting the feeling of hell and being controlled, being limited, and being mistreated, or just kind of like pushed into those dark corners, that's just a part of, like, you know, the alchemy to rise to the surface as a sovereign being, to move through those gatekeepers and those manipulations that try and plug into our wounds, our insecurities, our lack of self-awareness. And then when we, you know, rise, you know, we've integrated the polarity of light and dark, and then the womb energy is restored, and we're able to birth again, we're able to create again. And that's where we get our creative freedom back. But if we don't do that work, you know, these places are sort of lost to us, and we're emulating these program versions. And then boom, you know, it hits people one day like, whoa, okay, there's more of me in here. And it's part of this really sort of crazy, like, galactic history and earth history, because we're a part of the earth grids in the multidimensional cosmos. We are replicas of it. I mean, it's amazing, you know, what it requires for us to awaken those parts so that it knocks out the rest. And that is synonymous with how we break down these dark technologies, because what they're seeking to do is to keep us in those imbalanced states. Because as long as the masculine and feminine are out of balance, as long as we're polarized with the light and dark, with the right and left brain separate, science and spirituality, as long as these things are pulled apart, that is the feeding ground that they require. And that feeding ground is, you know, yeah, I mean, the root of it is imbalance, and how that opens a portal for these warring energies to say, oh, wow, that's an imbalanced world. I can suck on this, I can feed on it, because it's not conceiving anymore. It's not relating anymore. That energy circulation is broken, and that wound or fragment is literally allowing these things to hook in. So from the guardian host perspective, it states that the Baphomet is a satanic field in the earth. This is essentially the satanic ritually abuse of the Holy Mother's Cathar body, the SRA abuse of the Holy Mother's Cathar body, holding her hostage by binding her body into the earth through demonic forces to produce the Dark Mother. So we see this throughout history with how they would, you know, treat women or burn women at the stake, or, I mean, obviously the feminine energy has been attacked, and it's been kind of dragged into all that, the masculine as well, sending them off to war, teaching them not to cry, you know, just these things have been imposed upon us. So the abuse of the feminine has become like a trauma and like almost a fear of letting your light shine, because it's like, will I be punished? Will I be like hung? Will I be persecuted? I mean, the history is so old. I mean, there's story upon story upon story, and things that, you know, we don't even know about that are major abuses to these, you know, divine representations of self. And yes, you know, the masculine, like I said, but the fact that there has been sort of this feeding on the trauma is what we're breaking. And so this is the source of ancient pain held in the planetary body when we lost our true mother, and it's felt in all lineages of the Holy Mother, the Cathar lines, the Mary Magdalene, Sophias. So we're all connected with that. And so as you see, there's the resource for that, energeticsynthesis.com. Lisa Renee talks about that. And that's huge because, you know, it's just like my whole life felt like I was trying to rescue these pieces, and I could see the programming, and it was just like, oh my gosh, there's got to be more people that know this stuff or are aware of this stuff. Because I mean, it's like society doesn't accommodate these sort of journeys. Like I had to literally live on the road for over 10 years to do the inner work, to remember the fullness of self. And I even told my mom, like, I've been buried alive. I got to dig myself out. And she's like, what? And so, you know, we can see that we all carry this. We all have this divine template within ourselves that needs us to resurrect it, needs us to bring it back up, needs us to do whatever it takes. And the thing is, having an agreement to come into this physical plane is going to force us to do this kind of work, even if there's aspects of ourselves that are healed from it. There's always that part of ourself that isn't dealing with this, that we can connect to. That becomes our internal guidance, our support. It's connected to our guides, connected to our truth, connected to our higher awareness. And that was definitely a guide for me. Like, you're almost done, just keep going. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing this for the dark night of the soul of Gaia, and I'm doing this for humanity, and it just has to be done because this is a broken system. This is a fallen system, and this is what it's going to take. And it was like my whole childhood and my whole life has been about this. And then when the Mars recruitment happened, they recognized that I had that archetypal connection and wanted to, drag me off planet with a partner they saw me connected with in a previous lifetime to sabotage just the ability to hold that energy here and share with others who are aware of this as well, who have also been targeted. I mean, this is the stuff they don't want us to know. It connects with the earth grids, the repair work of the earth grids. It connects with our capacity to do soul alchemy and restore our DNA. So this part of the Christ Sophia's fallen consciousness is called the Achamoth. The subsequent impregnated creations that are enmeshed in the negative form body is mixed with fallen angelics and earthly forces. This is called the Baphomet field. So it's very connected to the inverted pentagram and the reversals that have been put in the dodecahedron platonic solid to separate us or separate our connection from ether, right? So this is the fragmented mother, where a portion of her is in the underworld, but through connection with her true essence, the great cosmic mother, she's able to return again. And then mother-daughter are reconnected and aligned with the Christ consciousness, and that is the divine blueprint. But this journey is revealed through Venus transits. It's revealed through certain mythologies where we see the divine feminine going into the underworld, and we see that this is a part of our greater stories. And basically, when we don't emerge from the underworld, or we keep getting thrown in there, that's a part of the ritual abuse connected to the mother that has become the 13 families and actually stolen that magical number to basically siphon and harvest our energies. And our awakening to our true divine template is going to stop their ability to do that. But this was because of an exploded planet and a trauma that took place that caused fragmentation, and it sucked a portion of the mother's energy into the body, into the planet.
Portal to Ascension proudly presents the second annual conference at sea. Step aboard the Celebrity Infinity for Mystery School at Sea, an extraordinary 10-day voyage through the mystical lands of ancient Greece and Turkey, sailing from March 20th to 30th, 2026. Journey through the sacred sites of the ancients, Nafplio, Heraklion, Rhodes, Kavala, Thessaloniki, Ephesus, Athens, and more, where cosmic wisdom, lost civilizations, and divine knowledge converge. Featuring world-renowned authors, researchers, and channelers, guiding you into the deep memory of these sacred lands, unlocking past lives, sacred geometry, and the hidden consciousness of the ages. Immerse yourself in transformative lectures, hands-on workshops, and exclusive special events, each custom-tailored to help you remember that you are an initiate of the Mystery School. This isn't just a cruise, it's a portal to higher awareness, an awakening to the wisdom encoded in your soul. Are you ready to remember?